कणवसौ मानसं मे सुजाता गम्भीरत्वात् क्वचन समये गूढनिक्षिप्तविश्वा गम्भीरत्वात् क्वचन समये गूढनिक्षिप्तविश्वा
उपमा कालिदासस्य भारवेर अर्थगौरवम् दण्डिनः पदलालित्यं माघे सन्ति त्रयो गुणाः. To those of you who have been exposed to basic Sanskrit literature, you will be aware of this famous shloka. This verse in Sanskrit talks about four great poets. Besides talking about the poets, it makes a special remark about a unique characteristic feature found in each of their literature. Upama Kalidasasya. If one has to understand how similes have to be presented, if one has to understand how beautiful can similes be, then they must be readers of Kalidasa's works. Upama Kalidasasya. Bharaver Arthagauravam. If one would like to sense how words can be used, appropriate words can be used, words that absolutely remind us of how grand a language can get, then they may have to read the literature of Bharavi, Bharaver Arthagauravam. If one has to understand how sentences, how phrases, how lines can be as tilting, as moving as probably the river waters, then they may have to read Dandi's works, Dandinaha Padalalityam. Well, I want the best of similes in the work that I read. I want the best of the vocabulary to be used. I want the sentences to be tilting as well. If I want all the three features in one work, what should I be reading? Maghe santi trayo gunaha. Then we may have to read the literature of Magha. Thus, we come across literature. Literature is not restricted to one language. Literature could be from a variety of languages. Who says there's no literature in Greek? We have very beautiful literature in Greek. Well, we are fans of English literature too. Latin, French, German, Hebrew, Arabic, Mandarin. Well, the world is filled with languages. But now that we are trying to understand and appreciate the Indic heritage, here we need to appreciate and regard one of India's ancient heritage languages, and that is Sanskritam. Sanskritam in itself means that language which is already perfect. As is, when the language is perfect, it is Sanskritam. There were commentators who extrapolated the meaning and said, this is one language that doesn't need any amendments. It is so good that it is perfect the way it is. Kritam, Samskritam, which is perfect. In this language of Sanskritam, we have had literature ranging for over 3,000, 4,000 years. Well, we have of course appreciated, devoted our time to Itihasas and Puranas. The Itihasas and our Puranas have come to us in the form of poetry, which is padyam. If we have to, in a very basic sense, understand how literature is evolved, we know that to any language, its letters that make up its alphabet is very, very important. Sanskritam, like any other language, is also made up of letters that make up its Sanskrit alphabet. We have vowels and consonants too. A, I, U. This is the sound that emanates from your throat. Urastam kanthakam vakyam vartate madhyame sware. It comes from the throat. Then there are stresses that we add. Ka, kha, ga, gha, ng, cha, cha, ja, ja, nya, ta, ta. So look at the sound that comes. Now each of this is married to the initial sound that comes from the throat. A, I, U is married to ka, kha, ga, gha, nga, cha, cha, ja, ja, nya. How will we marry them? Ka plus a is ka. Ka plus a is ka. Ka plus I is ki. Ka plus I is ki. So you're marrying the sound of I to ka, kha, ga, gha, nga. So you will have resultant, you will have many letters. So you've got ka, ka, ki, ka, ka, ki. So these are the sounds and the letters, the corresponding letters that emerge. But I just can't keep letters and administer a language. The letters have to get together in various permutations and combinations to give an object a meaning. I look at an object, that object is an entity which is a flower. And that flower blooms in a beautiful pond. As the rays of the morning sun fall on the closed bud, the petals start blossoming, and there you have a beautiful lotus with the stalk that runs so deep into the marshy waters of the pond. So I find a flower. I need to give it a name. So what do I do? Ka, ma, la, yim. Ka, ma, la, yim. Kamalam. So kamalam is a word that associates itself with the object. What is the object here? It is a flower. Same is the case with every other object or every other entity that we see around. So every entity gets a name. This name is a resultant of the letters coming together. Now we have words. Kamalam. We have Ramaha. We have Rama. So each word has a sound. For example, Ramaha. Generally, these words which end with this sound, aha, generally they are termed masculine in nature, pullingam in nature. Generally, words which end with a sound are deemed feminine, strilingam, Rama, Uma, Soumya, Saundarya, Lata, Gita. So this Akarantavachaka Shabdam generally is deemed feminine. There are certain words which are neither masculine nor feminine. So they are called Napumsakalingam, neuter gender, Kamalam. So this is a Napumsakalinga Vachaka Shabdam. So we have letters, we have words, we have a gender assigned to them. There could be numbers as well. Something very unique about Sanskrit as a language is, in the number system, it doesn't restrict to singular, plural. Most languages we know comprise of that, right? We have book, books. So if I have more than one book, it is books. Tree, one. More than one, trees. Pen, pens. So this is how most languages do it. It is called Eka Vachanam. Eka in Sanskrit indicates one. Vachanam is the number. Eka Vachanam indicates one. Bahu Vachanam, Aneka Vachanam means more than one. But in Sanskrit, you have something very unique. You have one, two, and more than two. It is not one and more than one. It is one, two, more than two. So there is one Ram, Ramaha. Imagine there are two Rams. If you notice, in Parashurama's story as well as analyzing Ramayana, we found Parashurama standing along with Rama. So there are two Ramas. So Ramau. If there are two, Ramau. Imagine there are many Ramas. So Ramaha. So Ramaha, Ramau, Ramaha. One Ram, two Rams, and many Rams. So we have letters, we have a gender, we have a number. Now we have to put these words together to make a sentence. Nishadheshu Nalaha Namaraja Asit. Nishadheshu. Nishadha is a country. Nishadheshu in Nishadha, which is that particular province. Nalaha Nama Raja. Nalaha is the name. Nama, the name is Nala. To whom? Who bears that name? Raja. There was a king. Asit. Is he there? No. He was there. So this Asit indicates past tense. So Nalaha Nama Raja. Nishadheshu Asit. Nishadheshu Nalaha Nama Raja Asit. Whichever way you put, you get the meaning. So there is a sentence. A sentence is a vakyam, a pankti. So letters, then you have words, you assign a gender, you assign the number, and you make up a sentence. Suppose I write sentence after sentence to convey a story. Then that put together will be prose. If I take the same story as my theme and write it in a certain meter where the words could rhyme, where I don't necessarily have to convey every emotion because the words, the placement and the tone in which one recites could convey the emotion. In such a case, a padyam is born. Initially I spoke about prose, that is gadyam. Then when I put it in a certain meter, a certain format, then I end up having poetry, which is padyam. So padyam, poetry, gadyam, prose. There are chances that as a composer, I can use a mix of both. I keep writing prose, which is gadyam, intersperse it with certain verses, which is padyam, which is poetry. This mixing of padyam and gadyam is called as champu. And when I add dialogues of a person, for example, a king comes and says, "Can you open the door?" The soldier says, "Sure, sir." So these sentences seem as if it is being uttered by characters. Then I create a drama, which is a nataka. So right from letters, we have arrived at a drama, a plot. We have arrived at prose and poetry. So when I keep a theme, assign a theme and work around it, I create literature. So such kind of literature is born in every language, and Sanskritam has had its share of contributing to the Indic heritage, to our civilization for millenniums together. So we will have the opportunity to basically understand who were such great poets and how do we understand them better. In this journey of understanding a select few of the poets and dramatists through various periods of time in our civilization, in our Indian subcontinent, we will be able to relish their contribution as well. So I will just list down a few poets whom we will have an opportunity to have a glimpse of, just an introduction. Bhasa, Vishnu Sharma, Shudraka, Kalidasa, Bhartrihari, Bharavi, Vishakadatta, Magha, Mahendravarma the first, Dandi, Banabhatta, Bhavabhuti, Sriharsha, Vedanta Deshika, Neelakantha Dikshita, Venkatadhvari Kavi. So we will have roughly 16 people about whom we will be discussing in brief. Let me begin with Bhasa, before which I shall just add a disclaimer about the overall Sanskritam as a literature. If we have to classify literature in Sanskritam, in Sanskrit, we basically do that into two. One is of the Drishya category, the second is the Shravya category. Shravyam means that which we can imagine and relish just by listening. Shravanam is listening. Shravya, that which is suitable for listening. So if I have to read Ramayana, I can read it myself, and the description is so vivid, without any properties. I don't have to do a setup of a palace to understand that this is the palace of Dasharatha. Here walks Rama with the bow and quiver of arrows. As Valmiki describes, and as I'm engrossed in it, I'm able to paint a clean picture right in front of my eyes. So these works are worth listening to. So this is a Shravya work. So be it the Ramayana, be it the Mahabharata, be it the Puranas, they all come under the Shravya category. But there are works in Sanskritam largely drama in nature, dramatic in nature, where they will have a plot, where they will have a protagonist, the hero, where there will be a rasa, a sentiment that goes around, and such a package is worth reading, but even better when you see it. So it is drishyam. So you can see it. Drishya is to see. It is better I see it and relish it. So we have had various dramas, various plots that have come from the best of dramatists in our country. So we have these two categories. Ramayana, Mahabharata and the Puranas we have fairly discussed. Now we will go to literature. If most commentators and researchers have to classify the literature that has come to us in Sanskrit, they keep a certain benchmark. They say this, before this, and after this. There is a benchmark or probably a work that set the trend. And that work is the Natya Shastra of Bharata Muni. Bhava, Raga, Tala. That is Bharata. Bharata Muni was the composer or the compiler of a work called as a Natya Shastra. This Natya Shastra of Bharata Muni clearly lays down, besides discussing the intricacies of the Indian classical dance, it talks about how a drama should evolve, because dance is after all an expression of the human mind. So for expressing, drama helps. How should a drama be? So he says that a drama should have a vastu, which is a plot. It should have a nati, which is a hero or a neta. And then there should be a sentiment, a rasa. So he talks about the ashta rasas, the 8 kind of sentiments. So he talks about krodha, anger. He talks about karuna, mercy. He talks about veera rasam, that which gives valor and courage. So such kind of sentiments have been discussed by him. For those of you who may be listening, you may be wondering, I've heard of Navarasas. Where is this 8? I thought it was 9. Bharata Muni talks only about 8. Later, the 9th rasa evolved over a period of time. That is the Shanti rasa, that which is tranquility, that which gives you bliss. So this is generally not that easily expressible in dance. So he avoided that in Natya Shastra. Later it came into picture over a period of time through researchers. So then we had Navarasas. So there is a rasa, there is a neta, there is a vastu, a plot. So all put together as a package is what a literature should present. Of course, he laid down some minor rules as to how a work should begin, how a work should end, how it should not end, and so on. So we have placed some dramatists and some poets with their literature before the coming of Natya Shastra, because their works don't adhere to this tradition as laid down by Bharata Muni. So let me begin with the first one, who's Bhasa. Bhasa has been respected immensely by all our acharyas, and Bhasa, his works have been quoted by many poets and dramatists. But one thing that we need to remember about Bhasa is his works, though which were often referred to, commented upon by later poets, his works were not found in the last 300-400 years. It went missing. We were unaware where his works were, because today we are living in a digital world where any book can be scanned, the manuscripts could be scanned, just a photo is enough for us to see. But it was a very tough time for the researchers and fans and followers of Sanskrit literature to trace the works of Bhasa. Though they knew he existed, though they knew his works were very popular, they couldn't find manuscripts until in the first half of the 20th century, a great researcher and Indologist, Sri Ganapati Shastri, in the Travancore Library in Thiruvananthapuram of Kerala, was able to accidentally spot the manuscripts of Bhasa, his works. Bhasa's works can be largely classified into three categories. One, those works that revolve around Ramayana as the theme. Second, those works which revolve around Mahabharata as the theme. Third, miscellaneous works. In the Ramayana category, he has brought about two major works. There are a few other works, I'll just take up two. The first one is Pratima Natakam. Pratima Natakam has its theme of the latter half of Balakandam, the entire Ayodhya Kandam, and the Aranya Kandam. The marriage of Rama to Sita, and so of his brothers to their respective wives, and followed by Rama, Lakshmana and Sita, the trio marching to the forest, Bharata accepting the Padukas to be the king in the absence of Rama, and then the trio moving to the forest and talking to the rishis. So this is the theme for Pratima Natakam. Second is a work called Abhisheka Natakam, which has the next three cantos, which is Kishkinda Kandam, Sundara Kandam, Yuddha Kandam. These three cantos become the theme of this particular drama called as Abhisheka Natakam. Next, when we deal with Mahabharata, he comes across very short plays, but those plays are very impactful, like Dutavakyam, Uru Bhangam, Karanabharam, and so on. Well, these plays are extremely valuable and very relishable, but I'm going to take up a work for our understanding and delineation from the miscellaneous category. This work is called Swapna Vasavadatta. So there was a king called Udayana, and he fell in love with the princess of the Avanti region. Her name was Vasavadatta. So he barged into the kingdom of Avanti and was a bit skeptical about whether to get the permission of Vasavadatta's father or not, and quietly consults with her and elopes with her. So he, without informing anybody, he runs away with the princess of Avanti. Her name was Vasavadatta. Because he eloped with his daughter, the father of Vasavadatta started bearing a grudge, wanted to avenge this act. So he was not in good relations with the king Udayana. On the other hand, there was a king called Aruni, who of the neighboring region to Udayana of the Vatsa kingdom, wanted to invade the region. Now that he has had no good relationship with his father-in-law, on the other side there is a Aruni, though being a king of great valor and courage, he wanted to ensure that his kingdom is safe. So the easiest way was to forge an alliance. That is when his mantri, his minister, called as Yaugandharayana, he says, why don't you marry, O king, why don't you marry Padmavati? She is the sister to the current king of Magadha dynasty. The king was not for it because his love was entirely for Vasavadatta. And just to protect his kingdom, he did not want to pawn his loyalty and his love and his affection to his wife Vasavadatta. Nevertheless, Yaugandharayana, as a dutiful minister, goes to the apartment of Vasavadatta and conveys the concern that he has for the kingdom. So Vasavadatta, understanding the situation that the country is in, and for or in the interests of the subjects of their kingdom, along with Yaugandharayana, goes to the kingdom of the Magadha king, and she acts like a maidservant to the sister of that king. Her name was Padmavati. Padmavati was not doubtful because she thought she's a maidservant. Of course, she was very pretty, very beautiful, but she didn't know she too is of the royal clan. So Padmavati was being served by Vasavadatta in disguise. In order to search for the missing Vasavadatta, the Vatsa king Udayana and his minister, they come in search. So as they meet up with the Magadha king, Yaugandharayana tells it's high time that he forges an alliance. The king, understanding the calamity that his kingdom will be meted to, forges an alliance saying that shall marry Padmavati, your sister, O king. Padmavati understands that she is going to get married to Udayana. Upon the insistence of Yaugandharayana and in the interest of his subjects, Udayana forges an alliance with the king of Magadha and promises that he shall marry his sister Padmavati. On the other hand, Vasavadatta, knowing that the princess of that region, Padmavati, was sick, rushes to her apartment. In her place, she finds Udayana, the king, sleeping. Padmavati was missing. So after having been separated from her beloved king for so many days, she goes close to him and touches him and slightly moves her fingers over his hair locks. Realizing that this is the touch of Vasavadatta that he had been missing for so many days and months, the king opens his eyes. Meanwhile, Vasavadatta runs out of the apartment. As the king runs behind her, he finds her missing. That is when Yaugandharayana comes and says, no, this is your dream. So, this is an instance to say that this incident happened in reality, but to him he was made to believe that it was his dream. So continues the play. So this is a very beautiful way for us to analyze Swapna Vasava Datta. If we read up the dialogues that Bhasa produces, it is exemplary. So Swapna Vasava Datta is a befitting example of Bhasa as a great dramatist. Bhasa as a dramatist is believed to have lived between the 4th and the 5th century BCE. So he lived roughly 2400, 2500 years before from our times now. Now, we will have the opportunity to move to the next contributor to Sanskrit literature. His name was Vishnu Sharma. Vishnu Sharma is said to have belonged to the 3rd century BCE. And his work is something that students of the kindergarten could also be taught. And that is called as the Panchatantra. He tries to convey morals and values that is meant good for the society, that is meant or that means a lot of good to us, through stories that largely involve animals. Let me now narrate a story for you from his huge collection of stories in Panchatantra. Kasyachid राजो नित्यं वानरो अतिभक्तिपरोंग सेवकोन्तः पुरे अप्य प्रतिषिद्ध प्रसरो अतिविश्वासस्थान प्रभूत. So there was a king, Kasya Chid Rajo Nityam Vanaro Atibhakti. So he was served by a very, very obedient, loving monkey. And so this king was so fond of the monkey because he had a very good relationship with the monkey. He kind of made that his pet. He was so affectionate to the monkey, he trusted the monkey so much so that the monkey alone had access to his antavpuram, to his apartment, even in the mid of the night. So there was no need for the monkey to seek anybody's permission, and the king was so magnanimous to the monkey. Ekada, once, Rajo nidragatasya vanaro vyajanam nitva vayum vidadati. Rajo vakshasthala upari makshikopavishta. One day, the king nidragatasya, he was feeling very sleepy. Vyajanam nitva, since he was very tired, he wanted to take rest, and the monkey started fanning the king. It started giving breeze to the king by taking a hand fan and started fanning him. Meanwhile, the monkey noticed on the chest of the reclining sleeping king, Vakshasthala upari makshika upavishta, there was a fly that was seated on the broad chest of the reclining or the sleeping king. Vyajanena muhur muhur nishidhyamanapi punaha punastaishrasthapa vishati. So, step by step, the monkey did not want to disturb the sleeping king. It wanted to move the fly away. Tatastena swabhava chapalena murkhena vanarena kruddhena sata tikshtam khadgamadaya tasya upari praharo vihitaha. Now, trying to drive away the fly from the sitting on the chest of the king, the monkey tried doing it in its own ways, but the fly failed to move. It went from here till there, from there till here. It didn't move at all from the chest region. The monkey got really angry. Khadgamadaya tasya upari praharo vihitaha. It drew a sword from the scabbard and just wanted to kill the fly and hit that on the chest of the king. The fly went flying again. But what happened? The king's chest was sliced. Tato makshika uddiyagata. So that makshika, that fly, that went flying. That no hurt was meted to the fly. Tena shita dharenasina rajo vakshodvidajatam raja mritascha. His chest was split into a two, and thereby raja mritascha, he died. So what does this convey? He always mentions a moral to it. Vishnu Sharma, 2300 years before, he compiles these stories. Tasyam chirayutarichhata nripena murkhor anucharo na rakshaniyaha. A king who desires a peaceful long life should never have murkho anucharo na rakshaniyaha, should never have a fool as his protector, as his bodyguard, as his soldier, or even as his minister. So each of these stories that have been mentioned, they may have never happened, but the Vishnu Sharma has been so creative enough to construe these stories and add a moral to it, which could be a big, big moral booster to us in this time and in the coming times. So Vishnu Sharma comes across to us as a great contributor to Sanskrit literature. Next, we will be talking about another great poet called Shudraka. Shudraka is believed to have lived in the 2nd century. Now we are coming to the common era. We have noticed Bhasa and Vishnu Sharma in the BCE period. Now we are coming to the CE period, the common era period. So Shudraka is said to have lived in the 2nd century CE. One of his very famous works is called Mritchakatika, which means a little clay cart. A little clay cart is called as a Mritchakatika. This is a long drama, a play. It begins with a beautiful verse. There is a Mangalacharanam. Mangalacharanam is an invocatory verse, so that the poet, the author or the dramatist praise to their Ishta Devata, to their favorite deity, God, so that the work that they have begun is successful. Paryanka Granthi Bandha Dvigunita Bhujaga Slesha Samvita Jano Ranta Prana Varodha Vyapura Talaka Sagnana Ruddhendriyasya Atmanyatmanameva Vyapagata Karanam Pashyatas Drishtya Shambhorva Patushunye Kshana Ghatitalaya Brahma Lagna Samadhihi. Shudraka, he offers his pranamams, obeisances to Lord Shiva. He says the one who's seated in a Paryankasanam. Lord Shiva is believed to be seated in an asanam, sometimes referred to as Virasanam, with one leg folded and the other leg extended. He is referred to in this calm, peaceful form as Dakshinamurti, the one who bestows quintessential knowledge. So Shudraka prays to Lord Shiva. And while he concludes the work, he says, Kshirinya santu gavo bhavatu vasumati sarva sampanna sasya parjanya kalavarshi sakala jana mano nandino vantu vata modantam janma bhaja satatam abhimata brahmana santu santaha Srimantah pantu prithvim prashamitari pavo dharmanishthascha bhupa. The dramatist says, for those who have read this work of mine with such great patience and magnanimity, worry not. The Lord will bless you with immense wealth. And in those days, wealth was generally in the form of cows. So every cow would have, a house will have a cow shed, and the cow shed will have at least minimum one cow. They'll have many cows and calves, of course, minimum one cow. And taming the cow, letting the cows graze and feeding them, and then the cows bearing children, they giving birth to calves and then extracting milk, getting it boiled, making it into curds, getting the butter, making it ghee. This process was so used to in most or probably all households, be it in those days, yesterday's cities or towns or villages. So he says, Kshirinya Santugavo, so the cows that you own will give you immense wealth, which means they will be giving you a lot of milk and thereby other milk products. So I've spoken about the invocatory verse and the concluding verse, but this entire work goes like a drama. There are dialogues. So it begins with a very generous young man. His name is Charu Datta. And he was well settled, and the city, the Rajadhani where he lived in, the inhabitants of that particular place respected Charudatta a lot, because whatever wealth he was bestowed upon him by his parents and his ancestors, he was so generous in giving away to the needy people. So people knew that this man may not be well off now, but he's been very generous, and so they gave a lot of respect to him. Charudatta was married and he had a son. Over a period of time, after having seen her in the streets and then later seeing her performances, he falls in love with a beautiful courtesan, a dancer. Her name was Vasanta Sena. She too started relishing the company of Charudatta, so they became secret lovers. On the other hand, seeing her form, seeing her physical characteristics, seeing her exhibition, showcasing of her artful skills, especially in classical dance, the brother-in-law to the ruling king was called Palaka. The brother-in-law to the ruling king called Palaka, his name was Samsthanaka. He was madly, violently in love with Vasanta Sena. One day, understanding that this Samsthanaka, the brother-in-law to the very influential king, was always behind her, to seek asylum, Vasanta Sena runs to the place of Charudatta. Charudatta and Vasanta Sena start living together, and while Charudatta is caught in severe financial crisis, that is when Vasanta Sena gives all her valuable jewelry. While Charudatta was initially hesitant, he thought he could still make use of it, come back to fortune and return to her. Meanwhile, times were so bad that the jewellery given by Vasantasena to Charudatta was robbed of. So, on the other hand, one day, Vasantasena, while she was walking on the streets, she noticed a little boy pulling a small cart made out of clay. That little clay cart is called a Mrichakatika, and this little boy was pulling that cart along the streets, but with a face that was filled with a lot of sadness. Vasantasena goes up to him and asks, "My dear boy, why are you sad? Who are you?" This boy introduces himself as the son of Charudatta. I did mention that Charudatta was already married with a son. This was that son. Vasantasena immediately took cognizance of this boy and she asked, "Why are you sad?" He said, "All this while, all these years I've been playing only with this little clay cart. I wish it were gilded in gold." So she was left with a few jewelry and she filled the cart, the little clay cart that the boy was carrying, with that jewelry and said, "This is all yours, take it." The boy went running. Meanwhile, taking this jewelry in the cart, meanwhile the jewelry from the cart was also taken. And people thought, when this jewelry is also taken, there is no other way but to doubt the intent of Charudatta. On the other hand, Vasantasena, she is being pulled into a chariot by Samsthanaka, the brother-in-law to the king. He strangles her and assumes that she is dead. Now, Charudatta, who has had to bear the accusation of stealing the jewelry of Vasantasena, is now pulled to the court of Palaka. Along with Charudatta, Charudatta's wife and his son are also imprisoned. While the king, without any investigation, was about to pronounce the judgment on Charudatta, to the very happy and the amazing attitude of sarcastic and very, very sadistic attitude of Samsthanaka, that is when Vasantasena gets into the court. People were surprised. They thought she was dead. It was shocking to the eyes of Samsthanaka. That is when Vasantasena says that yes, Samsthanaka did try to strangle me, but later I was given life and protected by a Buddhist mendicant. And I am here to prove that the jewelry was not at all robbed of her by Charudatta. So this act of rescue of Charudatta, the love that existed between Charudatta and Vasantasena, and the story that revolves around that little clay cart with which the boy was playing is called the very grand Shudraka's work, Mrichakatika. Mrichakatika, this play of Shudraka, came around the 2nd century CE. Now, we are going to go to the next poet of our consideration. It is Bhartrhari. He lived in the 5th century CE and he has given us many works, of which he's given the Spotavadam, which will be spoken of by scholars when they talk about words, phonetics and so on. So to us, in literature perspective, he has given a Shatakatrayam. Shata in Sanskrit means 100. Shatakam means a composition that comprises of 100 verses. What is the topic? There are 3 topics. So he has composed 3 different hundreds verses on 3 different topics. The first 100 is Niti Shatakam, about morals, ethics. Next, Shringara Shatakam, about love. Next is a Vairagya Shatakam, which is detachment. It talks about a strong detachment to things. You don't have attachment at all, you develop detachment. That is Vairagyam. So Niti Shatakam, Shringara Shatakam, Vairagya Shatakam. Put together it is called Shatakatrayam. I will take up one verse. क्षीरेणात्मा गतोदकाय हि गुणा दत्ता पुराते खिल क्षीरोत्तामपवेक्ष्य तेन पयसा स्वात्मा कृशानौ हुतः गन्तुं पावकमुन्मतस्त भवदृष्ट्वा तु मित्रापदं युक्तं तेन जलेन शाम्यति सता मैत्री पुनस्त्वीदृशी. He now gives us a story. He says there is a pot and there is milk in it. I have put that on fuel. So I have let the fuel burn so that the milk gets boiled. This Bhartrhari says, as I was noticing the milk boil, I found its levels come down, which means the water content in the milk got evaporated. So milk is generally, even if we don't wish to add water, milk generally has some water content in it. So milk is a combination of what properties milk is associated with water. So he says milk and water are great friends. That is why they gel well. When you add water to milk, they don't stand apart. When you add oil to water, you know the oil will keep floating. But here water and milk go well together. So they are the best of friends. As we started burning, boiling, the fire, the enemy wanted to separate these two friends, which is milk and water. As milk started boiling, the water started evaporating. So the water content, which is the friend to the milk, started evaporating. So water was separated from milk. So the two friends were separated. Now the milk couldn't withstand the separation of its great friend water. So it wanted to express its feelings. So it started boiling. So it started rising. It wanted to follow where his friend water has gone, water vapor has gone. Now, realizing this, Bhartrhari took some water and sprinkled on the boiling milk. So the moment water reached that milk, the milk which was rising out of emotion calmed down and settled, because temporarily water was added. Water is the milk's friend. So milk got together with water. So its feelings came down. See, a simple process of milk being boiled, water becoming water vapor, milk rising. All this has been put together as two friends, milk, water, enemy is fire. Then the person who's boiling is putting the friends back by sprinkling water. So this is how morals are to be driven into people like us. If it's going to come as a straight moral, probably we may not relish it. But there is a beautiful fashion in which he narrates. So Bhartrhari has given us the Shatakatrayam, which is respected immensely and has been commented upon immensely and has been used and quoted at various places by poets. Now let's go to a great dramatist of the 6th century CE. His name was Vishakadatta. This work of Vishakadatta describes the ascent of Chandragupta Maurya. So here goes the work. Dhanya ke yam sthita shirasi sashikala kim nu namai tadasya namai vasyastadetat parichitam apite vismritam kasya heto narim pritchami nendum kathayatu vijaya na pramanam yadindur devyarnir hetumichoriti surasaritam shathyamavyadbhibhurvaha. So it is as if this is the Mangalacharanam, the invocatory verse to this work of Vishakadatta. So here we have Parvati who sits next to Lord Shiva and asks, who's atop you? Who's there sitting? Actually it was Ganga waters which was seated, and Ganga is believed to be the elder sister to Parvati. So she wanted to inquire how did Ganga come there. But then she asks, who is there seated? Shiva intelligently manages. He says, Sashikala is seated. There is the Chandra, the man, moon who is seated. But then she continues asking, no, I see a moon and somebody above that. So Shiva replies. So this is like a conversation. Such works became very, very popular later. We have Krishna Karnamrita Shloka, कुटिले माधवः किं वसन्तो नो चक्री किं कुलालो नहि धरणिधरः किं द्विजिह्वः फणीन्द्रः. So there is a conversation that we know, something that I can take you to, which is very close what most children learn in their kindergarten. Johnny, Johnny, the father says. The boy says, yes, Papa. Eating sugar? No, Papa. Telling lies? No, Papa. Open your mouth? Ha ha ha. So this conversation has been put forth in Sanskrit verses much before. So this is a conversation based poetry. So Vishakadatta describes the ascent of Chandragupta Maurya. Chandragupta Maurya was one of the most influential kings, and if we read the historical documents as well as some anecdotal documents, we get to know that Chanakya played a major role in seeing the rise of Chandragupta Maurya. So this entire plot has been narrated in this work of Vishakadatta. Now let me take you to another great poet. If you remember, when we began this course of appreciation of Sanskrit literature, I spoke of a verse and I said it's quite popular. Upama Kalidasasya Bharaver Arthagauravam Dandinaha Padalalityam Maghe Santi Trayogunaha. I said, we spoke about 4 different poets. There came Bharavi. Bharavi was a poet who is said to have lived in the south of India, because we have an inscription in the town called Aihole in Karnataka, and that inscription is dated to the 7th century. So the Chalukyas in their inscription at Aihole in 7th century AD very clearly mention that there was a poet called Bharavi. So he must have surely lived before the 7th century. And looking at his style and the influence of the other poets his predecessors on his work, we can assign the 6th century to him. Most scholars opine that he belonged to the south of India. And he himself says that he was a very good friend of the great-grandfather to another great poet called Dandi, whom we'll discuss later. So Bharavi gave us a work called as Kiratarjuniyam. If you remember the course of the critical analysis of the Mahabharata, I spoke about Arjuna. Arjuna was told by Krishna that he has to acquire missiles and especially the grace of Lord Shiva. To acquire missiles, he goes to Amaravati, where his biological father Indra was super impressed with the valor and the dexterity of Arjuna and blesses him with many missiles. Then he learns dance from Uruvashi, Chitrasena, and then he comes back. Then he goes on to perform penance to Lord Shiva. So Lord Shiva has to come and give one of the most celebrated missiles or the astras of those days called Pashupatastra. So he performs penance to Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva appears in front of Arjuna in the form of a hunter. And there was an incident that happened which made Arjuna open his eyes. Duryodhana had sent a demon, a Rakshasa called Muka, in the form of a wild boar to go and attack Arjuna, who was in Tapasya. This wild boar, while it was about to attack Arjuna, that is when Arjuna opened his eyes, took his quiver of arrows and aimed an arrow at it and shot. Before that arrow could strike that particular boar, there was another arrow. As Arjuna got close, he saw this arrow which had struck first, because in those days, people who were adept in archery will know which arrow has struck first. So then he notices this is an arrow of a hunter, because hunter arrows are generally customized in a different fashion. There he spots a hunter, well built, well strong, handsome hunter. The hunter says, this is mine, I have shot the arrow. Though Arjuna never wanted the boar, but he couldn't take the defeat. He said, I had shot it first. So there was a battle that ensued between the both of them. That is when the hunter's wife was also present. And the hunter is none but Lord Shiva, and the hunter's wife is none but goddess Parvati. And there is a Champu Kavya called Bharata Champu, written by a poet called Ananta Kavi, who says, Yata Ishu Shrutim Jajapa. Yata Ishu Shrutim. Shruti means generally that which is listenable, hearable. But Shrutim also means Vedas, because Vedas are heard. Yata Ishu Shrutim. There is a Vedic aphorism which begins with Yataishu Shivatama Shivam Babhuvate Dhanuhu. This is called Shatarudriyam, which forms a part of Yajurveda. So the lady who was there, who's actually Parvati, there the hunter's wife, was worried to see her husband Lord Shiva as a hunter and Arjuna fighting. It was a fierce battle. So she was so much so worried that she thought that Shiva will have a defeat. So to give him an armor, a shield, to protect him, she started reciting the Vedic statement, Yada Ishushutim Jajapa. So there was a battle between Lord Shiva in the disguise of a hunter. A hunter is called Kirata, and Arjuna. So both of them fought. So this fight put together, of course, some incidents before the fight and after fight what happened. This entire theme has been put together in the form of a beautiful work called as Kiratarjuniyam. I shall recite one verse, the invocatory verse or the beginning verse of this work. Shriyak Kurunam Adhipasya Palinim Praja Suvrittim Yamayungta Veditum Savarna Lingi Vidita Samayayau Yudhishtiram Dvaitavane Vanecharaha. As they were housed in the Vana, they were on an exile for 12 years and Yudhishthira was a leader. So he had deployed certain people to understand how the regime, because none of the Pandavas were there, Bhishma was getting old, Drona will not interfere, Kripa will not interfere, so he was worried. Though he was not the king, he felt as a dutiful citizen, as a responsible citizen, I should know how the registration or the administration is going on in Hastinapura. So he deployed a spy, and that spy would go there, see how things are happening, and would come back to Yudhishthira in Dvaitavana and give him an account of how the regime was. Shriyak Kurunam Adhipasya Palinim Praja Suvrittim Yamayungta Veditum Savarna Lingi Vidita Samayayau Yudhishtiram Dvaitavane Vanecharaha. So Bharavi begins his work and continues. Now, there is a very interesting incident in Bharavi's life. We don't know much about him. There is only one incident that we attribute to Bharavi's life. And Bharavi makes a very, very passing note about this in Kiratarjuniyam. And that incident goes like this. Bharavi, from a very, very young age, he was filled with the art of composing poems. So he becoming a poet was no happenstance. He was born as a poet. So anything that he would write right from his childhood seemed so philosophical, so beautiful. So the people around his house, the habitat where he was living, the inhabitants of that particular place and from the neighboring quarters started praising Bharavi. So they said, Bharavi, such a great son, such a great boy, so obedient, so intelligent. And Bharavi, over a period of time, was offered their daughters, and finally he ended up marrying one lady. And the daughter-in-law, Bharavi, lived with Bharavi's parents. Bharavi was always of the opinion that the world is praising me, but here is my father not even offering a single word of appreciation to me. Is he jealous? Is he angry? Is he sadist? What is it? That thought troubled Bharavi. So one day he thought, it's high time that I kill my father. So Bharavi's father used to return from his work. He was either an agriculturist or he could have been a minister. He would return in the afternoons to the house to eat, to have lunch. And as he would sit in a certain place and eat, his mother, that is Bharavi's mother, used to be serving his father. So Bharavi got atop the roof, moved the tiles and took a huge piece of rock and wanted to aim it right on the head and smash the head of his father. So he was ready with the stone. He was ready to smash. That is when he wanted to give a chance and listen to what his father used to be talking to his mother in private. The father was telling the mother, "Where is Bharavi?" She said, "He's gone out." "Why are you saying that with a frown?" he asked. She said, "No, see, I have this worry. The world is praising our son Bharavi for his talents. And here you are, not even offering a word of appreciation on him or in his poetry. Isn't it wrong as a father that you're not offering a word of appreciation to our son Bharavi?" You know what the father said? Who said that I'm not proud of my son's achievements? I am very, very proud. I'm more proud than you, the mother. But remember, as parents, and especially as a father, I shouldn't be praising my son right in front of him. He will feel very flattered and may acquire arrogance. The world should praise him, and we should be appreciative of that very silently. As he said that, Bharavi felt a lot remorseful. He thought, I've committed the gravest mistake. I would have done a big offense if I had killed my father. He comes back to the house and falls at the feet of the father and says, this was my intent and I've done this wrong. The father said, no problem. See, that was your instantaneous thought. Don't worry, I love you, my dear son. But Bharavi insisted, see, I have committed a grave sin by even having the thought of killing you, my father. I need to do some emancipation for prayaschittam for this act of mine. The father said, now that you're insisting for a prayaschittam, my dear son, this is said on a lighter vein, that you need to go to your mother-in-law's house, stay at their place. The son was a bit confused. How is staying in my mother-in-law's place a prayaschittam, and how long can I stay? The father said, stay until she offers salt onto your plate with her left hand. He was again shocked. How is this going to happen? So the first day when Bharavi went to his mother-in-law's place, there was a huge plate filled with katoris, small cups laid with the best of food. So he was offered that. Big plate. So he started consuming. He was given a royal treatment. The next day, the 20 dishes that was cooked on day 1 became 10. The third day it became 5. Fourth day it became 4. Fifth day it became 3. And one day, the mother-in-law said, see, I'm very tired, so I've just cooked some rice. There are some curds. There's pickle. You can have. He was okay with it. The next day she said, see, every day I serve you, it takes time. Then I have to sit and serve myself. Why don't we sit together and eat? He said, that's okay. So Bharavi was seated. There was a plate in front of him. Next to him was seated his mother-in-law. So was a plate in front of her. So there were curds, there was buttermilk, there was cooked rice, there was some amount of pickles, and as they started eating, Bharavi noticed he needed more salt. The food was bereft of salt. He said, can I have some salt? So she took some salt in her left hand and put that on his plate. Because in Indian civilization, we have generally restricted ourselves from using that hand, left or right, whichever hand is generally used to clean ourselves. So using the left hand to serve something was not deemed hygienic. So when she did that out of lethargy, that's when his prayaschittam period was over and he came back. So this entire incident has been put forth in a small verse which is indicative of it in Bharavi's Kiratarjuniyam. So we come across Bharavi.
गम्भीरत्वात् क्वचन समये गूढनिक्षिप्त विश्वा नालिकेन स्फुरितरजसा वेधसो निर्मिमाणा नालिकेन स्फुरितरजसा वेधसो निर्मिमाणा